Thank you all for joining. I'm really excited for today's session. You'll see a poll if you haven't yet voted. This is just for our personal intrigue, so please take a second to do that. The goal of today is to get really tactical. We are joined by the fantastic Drew. Drew is a Seattle-based activist, campaigner, and organizer who is on a mission to make sustainability part of everyone's job, something that I can very much relate to, hence why I'm so excited for today's discussion. Drew also was part of a punk rock band called Run with the Hunted. Drew was also previously an eco-pirate with Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and went on to co-found Microsoft's 10,000, you heard me right, 10,000 plus strong employee sustainability group with his co-founder Holly. We are really excited to be joined by Drew. If we haven't met yet, my name is Leone. I am community lead at MCJ Collective. I am passionate about helping people find their space within the wider climate space, and actually started my career focused on sustainability internally at a consumer goods organization. And so in a very small way, we weren't Microsoft, we were a team of 12 people. I'm also excited to learn from Drew what it's like building internal movements, because it's really important that we do so. So I want to remind you about a couple of things. We are recording today. Today's session is going to run through a couple of minutes from Drew and a bit of presentation, so you get to learn more about Drew's work and himself as well. I will then be selfishly asking Drew all of my burning questions and putting him on the spot, channeling my inner Oprah, as we've discussed, if anyone can do that. And then we will be going to an open Q&A, and the Q&A function is on throughout. So you can start chucking in questions now if you feel like it. You can upvote questions in there. You can add comments to questions that are in there. As Drew goes through his presentation and I ask him a couple of questions as well, please do share what you would like Drew to answer, because yeah, we've got some time today and it's really important that we dig into this and get tactical. So without further ado, if you have questions on any of that, chuck them in the chat and I will respond. I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Drew, who is going to take it from here.
Great. First things first, you can see the slide and you can hear me, right? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I have good news and bad news. The good news is I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this since we started planning it a couple of weeks ago. The other good news is that I'm highly caffeinated, so I will go quickly through my slides so that we can get to the Oprah section, which is I know why we're all really here. The bad news is the band you heard was not mine. It was Rage Against the Machine, a much bigger, more popular, and in all accounts better band than mine. But if you want to go find what it sounds like and listen for yourself, you're definitely welcome to do that. So let's get started. So Leone, thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and Natalie from Climate People, who I don't believe was able to actually make the call this time, but I'm really excited to be here. As Leone said, I've had a pretty interesting career, if you want to call it that. I did spend a good chunk of my younger years in a touring punk band. In a funny way, that's actually what led to my career at Microsoft. We'll get to that a little bit later. As Leone said, I was an eco-pirate with an organization called Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which was an incredible experience. They're out there doing direct action to stop poachers from killing marine wildlife. And then for the past 7 years, I was a community organizer at Microsoft, where I founded the company's first employee sustainability community, sometimes referred to as a green team. And in the 5 years after founding it to when I left the company earlier this year, we grew it to, as Leone said, 10,000 people. So we're going to talk a bunch about that today. And as I kind of hinted, I'm no longer at the company. I was one of the 10,000 who were laid off earlier this year. Oh. And so I decided to start my own consulting company after that, because what we figured out how to do at Microsoft, not just sort of building this collective power for employees through a community, but what's more broadly now called employee engagement. Turns out this is a really valuable thing, and very few companies actually know how to do it. So I'm trying my hand at running my own punk rock small business, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you today as part of that journey. So thanks for being here. So my mission is pretty simple. It's to make sustainability part of everybody's job. And I think that this is an an interesting twist on this kind of concept of like how do I get a climate job? And we're going to go a lot deeper into this. The phrases may sound similar, but the distinction is that you may not have to actually leave the current job that you have in order to work on sustainability. So I like to start with definitions because I think that a lot of what prevents us from getting off the ground and being successful as we work to address the climate crisis is that we use words and phrases and language all the time, but we don't always have a shared definition for what that actually means. And climate job in particular is, I think, a particularly nebulous term. So I'm going to try to define it. Now, when you think of a climate job, what do you think about? Maybe you think about working in climate tech. Maybe you think about working from home on your computer. Maybe you think about carbon reduction or waste management or water replenishment or rewilding or biodiversity. Those are all climate jobs. But a big thesis of what I'm going to tell you today is that we need a more expansive view of climate jobs. And so things like wildland firefighting, trash collection, farming, and sort of reducing food waste, which is actually the #1 climate solution in terms of what we could deploy today. I would argue that all of these are climate jobs. And so if we expand our definition of what a climate job is, well, maybe some of us will be a little bit less frustrated trying to actually get those climate jobs. And so, Leone, I can't see the results from the poll, but can you tell me what people, oh, there we go. Let's take a look here. Let me pull it up on the screen so we can all look together. What I'm interested in is, would you be willing to take a pay cut to work on climate? 73% of you said yes. That is awesome. I really, really love that. And that surprises me. We'll come back to some of these other poll questions as we get a little bit deeper in. But that's great because if we do take a more expansive view of what climate jobs are, then ultimately some of us might actually have to take a pay cut to do that. So let's do definitions. Now, sustainability is a word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When I say sustainability, this is what I mean: to create and maintain the conditions that allow humans and nature to coexist for present and future generations. And when I say climate job, this is what I mean. It's a primary occupation that's largely focused on work that helps fix or adapt to climate change, or any role at a company whose primary mission is to fix or adapt to climate change, or any role where 50% or more of your clients or customers are for companies or projects that are focused on fixing or adapting to climate change. Now, look, there is no single one definition out there. I think this one is pretty good, pretty accurate. And what I like about it is that it kind of starts to tease out this idea that I'm going to go a little bit deeper in, which is that you may not need to go from 0 to 100% to work on climate. It's actually something that you can do gradually in a process, which is why I like that, sort of up to 50%. So I'm just going to let this one marinate for a minute because I really, really love the Matrix. But what if I told you that the shortest path to a climate job might actually be in your current company or in your current job, role, discipline, the career that you already have? So making the switch to a climate job. We talked about this in the poll. Let's pull these results up really quick. What strategies have you tried to get a climate job? So start your own company. Let me pull these up. Apply for a new job, quit your current one. Examine the intersection of your current job with sustainability and redefine it for others in your field, or influence your current employer to put more resources into sustainability and create more job opportunities. The vast majority of you are trying to apply for a new job and quit your old one. Just behind that, well, quite a bit behind that at 19%, is to examine the intersection of your current job with sustainability. 10% of you are have tried to start your own company, maybe successfully, but only 2% have tried to influence your current employer to put more resources into sustainability and create more job opportunities. Well, that was my path, and I'm going to tell you how I did it. There is an option 5 to this question. I also just really, really love Helmo. I think it's one of the best gifts, the best memes out there. And frankly, for those of us who are trying to work on climate or have been trying to work on climate, some days you really just feel like this. So let's talk about how I did this at Microsoft. So in 2020, Microsoft made 4 really big, ambitious sustainability commitments, which were to be carbon negative, water positive, zero waste, and protect more land than the company uses across its direct operations, all by 2030. By all accounts, these are industry-leading corporate sustainability commitments, and as one of the few trillion-dollar companies in the world, it says a lot for a company the size of Microsoft to be going for this. Now, part of the reason that the company made those sustainability commitments 3 years ago was because of pressure that employees put on the company from the inside through the employee sustainability community in the years preceding that. And so the company responded, said, great, we should do more about sustainability, and we will. So they made those big commitments. They also created a $1 billion climate innovation fund, no big deal. And when they created the new strategy for how the company was actually going to go out and do this, they literally put employees at the center of the sustainability strategy. So Lucas Joppa, Microsoft's first and now former chief environmental officer, who was the architect of these commitments and this strategy, recognized that in order to make it happen, you need to get the entire workforce engaged, all 200,000 people at Microsoft. So that is where the work that we did came in with the employee sustainability community. So let's watch a short video so you can learn about what this community is.
Sustainability cuts across everything that we do at Microsoft, from how we run our core operations, develop and deploy our products and services, partner with customers around the world, and how we use our voice on critical policy matters. Everything that we do is by and because of our employees, empowering our global workforce is at the center of our sustainability strategy.
Since 2018, Microsoft employees have self-organized into a grassroots sustainability community and found creative ways to leverage their experience, skills, and passion to help the company achieve its ambitious sustainability commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030.
It started with a handful of us.
Now, with the help of Connected Communities program,
the Sustainability Connected community has over 6,000 members and 35 chapters across the world.
Our mission is simple: make sustainability part of everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
The SEC gives every employee at Microsoft a chance to meaningfully contribute to the sustainable transformation currently underway.
It provides a centralized platform to educate, inspire, and activate our entire workforce.
And using the Power Up community, it gives everyone the tools and resources needed to create real-world solutions to the world's most pressing environmental challenges.
Most importantly, we are driving a wave of culture change and putting the health and well-being of the planet at the center of everything we do.
The SEC inspired thousands of Microsoft employees to find the unique ways they can make sustainability part of their jobs and personal lives.
Get past it. So as all good things, grassroots, it started quite small. You can see myself and my co-founder Holly, who's down there in the front row in the pink. The first thing we did as 2 employees was convince Microsoft to make its first zero waste cafeteria. Like many of you, moving through the office, moving through the built environment, you probably notice overflowing trash cans and a whole lot of single-use items and waste. And so as 2 random employees, we started trying to change that. Now, it took about a year. It took a long time. We had no influence and no real power, but we did ultimately get Microsoft to run a zero waste cafeteria as a pilot. And so that's when the first light bulb went off, that if 2 random employees could get a company the size of Microsoft to change a basic operational practice to be more sustainable, what would happen if there were thousands? So we started a local meetup group here in the Seattle area once a month after work. Anyone who cares about sustainability, let's figure out together what we can do. And as of earlier this year, when I left the company, it has become what we think is one of the largest, perhaps most sophisticated, or maybe most influential employee sustainability communities out there. So 10,000 members, 37 local chapters, people in more than 100 countries. There are 50 volunteer leaders who actually run 10 global programs and turn the cranks on the community every single day. Much like the MCJ community in Slack or Work on Climate, if you're familiar with that, This internal community has tens of thousands of conversations that are happening, every year that kind of cumulatively raise the sustainability fluency of the entire workforce. As you've seen, it's part of Microsoft's strategy. And as I said, it's always been a 100% volunteer, bottom-up, grassroots, employee-led effort. An important distinction, unfortunately, one we don't have a ton of time to go in today. It is not an employee resource group, which you may be familiar with at your employer. It is a community of practice, which is a knowledge sharing community. It's a different tool for a different job. But you can see a snip here from Microsoft's last year's environmental sustainability report. Employees are literally just part of it, and the community is the primary way that the company engages its workforce. So, okay, 10,000 members, blah, 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 like, cool. What did it actually do? Well, here's just a couple of things that the community was able to do successfully. So number one, top of the list for sure, was to push the company from the inside to become more sustainable, to make those huge sustainability commitments. That unlocked lots of resources and lots of job opportunities. In the last 3 years, we think that there's been something like a 10x increase in the number of sustainability jobs inside the company as a result of that. As I said, we worked really hard to make sure that employees were part of the company's strategy, that they were considered a key constituent group, so that whenever the company is making a decision about sustainability, it needs to consider the perspective and the impact on its own workforce. Really importantly, it's a process, it's not there yet, but we started to change the company's culture and priorities and change the paradigm of who gets to work on sustainability in a corporate environment. Because traditionally, it's only that small, tiny, chronically under-resourced group of sustainability professionals. Again, the mission was to make sustainability part of everybody's job. And I don't have time to go into this, but we'll share all the links at the end. The bottom set of things, carbon-aware computing, all the way down, these are a list of like hackathon projects, passion projects, things that Microsoft employees in the community created, used the company's resources, and it actually left the four walls of the company and has gone out and changed the broader world in really meaningful ways. So this is so much more than like a recycling club or something. This community is an engine of innovation that helps drive sustainability across the entire company. And now outside of that, other companies, industries, and all of that. So we're going to take two examples from this to help kind of take it from this abstract concept into something a little bit more tactical. And this is going back to that poll question that like 70-something% of you to get a climate job are just like, I got to quit the one I have and go get that climate job. How to green your current job is a totally viable and frankly, for many of us, a more accessible path to actually getting to work on climate. So did you know that if the internet was a country, it would be the fourth largest emitter of carbon emissions? This stat comes from the Sustainable Web Manifesto. This is just staggering. There's not a smokestack sticking out of my laptop. It feels pretty clean. It feels pretty green. But the actual infrastructure required to run this thing called the internet and all of the digital services that live on it is enormous. And so a group of designers at Microsoft got together and said, what's the intersection of digital design with sustainability? How do we actually codify principles that every designer, not just Microsoft employees, can use to combat climate change in their day-to-day work? So they formed a working group. They created a set of principles. They started publishing that inside the company and out. In the last couple of years, the green design principles from Microsoft have spawned an entire new discipline of green design, which is helping thousands of designers across companies and industries make sustainable change happen in the jobs they already have and in the work they already do. And the reason I brought up the internet statistic is because you might notice this slide deck looks a little different. That's because it's a low carbon PowerPoint deck. It is designed in dark mode because dark mode requires less energy than a bright white screen or bright colors. And so this is a really cool and really clear example of what happens when you give a group of employees who are not sustainability professionals in any sort of traditional way, enough education and enough resources to go out and figure out the unique way that they can contribute. Same thing with software. Unsurprisingly, Microsoft is a software company, something like 50% of the workforce. So a group of Microsoft employees started trying to ask the question, what is the intersection of sustainability with software engineering? And in the years since then, it has grown into something called the Green Software Foundation, which is an international nonprofit. It's a consortium. It's got members from tech, academia. There are practitioners, and they're trying to make software more sustainable at the code level. They're trying to build a trusted ecosystem of people and standards and tooling that everybody can use, all developers, all engineers in all industries and all companies, to build carbon-aware software, reduce the environmental impact of code, which runs the modern world. And as I said, it started as a small working group of employees in the Microsoft community and has since gone on to change the entire industry of software engineering, and in this case, create sort of new discipline, which is sort of green software. So these are two really cool tactical examples of how non-traditional roles can examine the intersection of sustainability with their current jobs, set a new design, a new set of principles, and then go out and change that entire discipline for every other person in the world who has that job. So we're getting close to the end now. My caffeine is slowing down. Making the switch to a climate job. Now, again, 70-something% of you are like, I'm just trying to quit the job I have and go get that other one. Look, there is nothing wrong with that. But from what I've seen and from many of the people I've talked to, this is a deeply frustrating way to get a climate job. A lot of rejection, a lot of hard work. And so instead of thinking of it as a switch that you flip, I personally think it's more helpful and more realistic to think of it as a dial that you turn over time. You're not going from 0 to 100. I mean, if you can, that's wonderful. I'm not saying this to be discouraging at all, but I think it's more realistic for many of us to think of this as a dial that we turn over time. Maybe 10% of your job is a climate job, and then 30. Maybe it goes back down because the priorities in your life change, or you get laid off, or like whatever. I just think it's more realistic and more helpful to think of this as a dial that we turn over time, because it does take time to make this transition happen. And so what I'm really trying to get at is I want us all to think bigger. This is about systems change. Now, I know that that's deeply frustrating when you're just like one of these people who's like, I just want to work on climate. Like, I get it. Trust me, I hustled so hard for so many years to do the same thing. But if we shift our perspective from how do I get a climate job to how do I help as many other people as possible get climate jobs? How do I create a larger environment where more opportunities and more jobs flourish? I just think we're going to tackle this problem with the right mindset, which is to move from one of scarcity to an abundance mindset, right? Like, this is really about systems change. This is not about any one individual person getting a job, although I hear you and I know that you want that. This is about creating an entirely new economy, a new way of doing everything that is required to run our societies. And so, to close, my summary, we need a broader and more expansive view of climate jobs. There's a lot of different ways to work on sustainability. You can do it in your current job, at your current employer. It can be a part-time hustle to begin with, and you can gradually ramp it up. There's a lot of jobs out there that sit unfilled in nonprofits, in blue-collar work, in manual labor. There's a lot more to climate jobs than just climate tech. We need creative approaches to not only attain these jobs, but to also create them for ourselves and for other people. This requires out-of-the-box thinking. The green economy is going to look very, very different. The green workforce is going to look very, very different. And so we need to be very creative and think out of the box in order to manifest that. We also need to change the paradigm of who gets to work on sustainability. We need to blow up the old model that only the hardcore dedicated professionals get to work on this. That is an outdated and unscalable. It doesn't scale. Everybody needs to work on sustainability. It needs to be part of everybody's job. Surely you've heard the rallying cry, every job is a climate job. Well, if that's true, then what that ultimately requires is that all of us take a proactive approach to make our jobs climate jobs, just like the way those green designers and the green software engineers did, to redefine what this entire discipline means for the thousands or maybe millions of us out there that already have these jobs. Every job is a climate job is an invitation for you to be a thought leader and figure out the way that you can actually do that. The other thing that I really want to harp on here is that if you start organizing, you can create pressure inside your current company and you can push them to be more sustainable. When you do that, guess what? More resources, more jobs, more opportunities for everybody, including yourself. And employee sustainability communities, green teams, are a very powerful way to gain on-the-job experience and influence, which is super important. Finally, working on climate is a journey, not a destination, right? We're turning the dial, not flipping the switch. And that's it.
Amazing. I love that. I'm gonna use that, turning the dial, not flipping the switch. That's fantastic. Thank you, Drew. I can see a lot of clicks and claps and smiling faces.
Now I can finally look at you all instead of my dark slides.
I think your message comes through really loud and clear. And I think one thing that I know we've discussed a lot, it speaks to the fact that there's a difference between working in climate and working on climate. And I think if you could sum up the difference between the two very quickly, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, another thing that maybe isn't like so clearly defined, because this is one man's opinion, and Leone, I know you've thought about this even more than me. I know you've even written about it. I saw your article. When I think of working in climate, let's just say that's that over the 50% threshold that I talked about in that sort of definition of a climate job. When the majority of your time, energy, and labor as a worker goes towards fixing or adapting to climate change, you're working in climate. Say under that threshold, anything under 50%, you're working on climate. And look, we need both things. And maybe not everybody wants to work in climate, have it be the full-time thing that they do all the time. That's great. What we need is to bring everybody into this movement and get them to contribute with the time, the energy, the experience, the unique background and experiences they have. And that's going to look different for everyone. For some people, it's 10%. For some people, it's 120. But we need it all, and it's all valuable. How would you answer?
Amazing. I think my answer would be a little bit different, but I agree with yours at the same time. I think working on climate is a mindset, not necessarily a job spec. And I think when we reduce it to being a job spec, we don't give ourselves permission to take action from where we currently are, which I think is what you've spoken to a lot. I want to get really, really tactical because we've got just under 30 minutes left. I want to give people the chance to answer questions. And if you have questions, please do chuck them in the Q&A. It will help us make sure we try and get through as much as we possibly can. And questions on anything, there's no limits. I want to get really, really tactical. 27% of the poll that we just did, 27% of people have a sustainability community within their current workplace. And then when asked at what stage the sustainability community is, about 10% said they were just starting, 8% was getting momentum, 8% was wheels in motion, only 6% was large and making progress, and then 5% was like, it's embedded, it's rolling, like it's taking action. And that suggests to me that a lot of people are either pre this journey, that sustainability community doesn't exist yet, or they're in the very, very early stages of it. I want to wind way back to when you first started that community at Microsoft. What were some of the very first steps you took? I know you mentioned data. I know you mentioned like zero waste cafeteria. What were some of the very first steps you took? What were some of the timeframes? How long did it take you to see the impact of the work that you had? At the point that you saw that first, okay, we actually have power by doing this. How many people were involved?
Okay, that's like 10 questions. Okay, so first point is that communities are a long game. Leone, I know you can attest to this. You run the MCJ community. It doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like it takes, look, let's just be real. It takes years to build something like this, to create the infrastructure so that people know where to find it, know what it is, know how to contribute and all of that. So that's the first thing, is that like communities are a long game, and that requires some patience and some humility, because there's also not like a blueprint for how to do this. Like, look, I'm the first to admit, as much as anybody can be like an expert in this, like I am, but I know how this worked at Microsoft. I don't know how this is going to work at your company or in your industry. That's part of why I decided to be a consultant, is because like I really want to find out. I want to know like what parts of this work are universal, which parts will always have to be sort of customized or tweaked for each company or industry or culture or whatever. I don't know, but you know your company in a way that people like me never will. And so the first point is like, just be persistent and don't give up. Slow and steady wins the race. Communities take a long time to build. Communities are also not like, they're not one thing. They're living, breathing organisms. They change, they ebb, they flow every minute, every hour. I mean, people are coming, people are going. They're like, it's even hard to define what the community is sometimes. But what you're really trying to do is create the conditions where people can thrive in these communities. I like to use a gardening metaphor. Your job, as a community organizer or something like that, is not to go out and plant a garden for people tend their crops, harvest them, and cook the food and feed them. It's to give them soil, water, nutrients, instructions, and teach them how to garden for themselves. So the work, this community work, is about building a conducive environment so that people can come in and find their own unique ways to contribute and to thrive. Now, for tactical steps, one of the first things you should focus on doing is trying to get top-down support. Sustainable culture change happens when you have top-down efforts meeting bottom-up efforts. That's where it happens the fastest. A lot of people will struggle to justify volunteering real time and real energy in something like an employee green team or community if their management is not supportive of it. And if you can go build trusted relationships with the key stakeholders inside your company, I would recommend starting with a chief sustainability officer or equivalent. Get them to be the executive sponsor of the community. Ask them, what role do you think employees have in our company's sustainability strategy? If that's not clear, if you can't find that in writing somewhere, that's an invitation for you to go to them and say, hey, there are, I don't know, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands, depending on how organized you are. There are a lot of us who want to contribute, who want to help this company be more sustainable. We're willing to roll up our sleeves and do the work to do that. But we need you to like sort of bless this community from the top down, make it a legitimate thing, make it a real thing. Help us understand your strategy so that we can ladder our actions up into it. So number one, don't do it alone. Build a big tent, build in the open. Community work is pretty different in some ways than I think a lot of the ways that many of us have been trained to work in our careers. You work in a silo, you hoard your knowledge, like my knowledge is my security, and like community is like a work out loud culture. So don't do it alone, do everything in the open. That's how people benefit from seeing the exchanges, seeing how it's done. And build trusted relationships with those key stakeholders. Try to get that top-down support. Position your community as a cooperative force in the company. Thousands of people, thousands of hours, lots of talent, lots of ingenuity, people who are really trying to help. That alone can unlock the resources that can only come from a top-down approach. Money, headcount, budget, and that can legitimize a community and turbocharge it. And take it from like, I don't know, like a just for fun thing that a couple of people care about to like, this is the way that most employees get to participate in sustainability at this company.
Awesome. At Microsoft, was that Lucas? Did you approach Lucas with that conversation at the point of having like, look, here's a list of people who are passionate about this. We don't know quite exactly what the form this is going to take, but here's a list. Or did you go to Lucas and then it spread from there?
So in my case, and with Lucas, who was the first chief environmental officer at Microsoft, it was a little unique because when I got to Microsoft, I was a paralegal. That was my entry point. It had nothing to do with sustainability. And it just so happened that he worked in the same building as me below, because at Microsoft, the sustainability team sits inside the legal department. And so in those early days, way before there was a community or anything, I was just like, okay, what is this company doing for sustainability? And, back in 2016, when I joined, the answer was not much. There was like less than 5 people who worked on it, and Lucas was one of them. And so I used to just I just went downstairs and knocked on his door and was like, you're one of 5 people in this company that work on sustainability. I'd like to get to know you. So I already had a personal relationship with him. And then over the years, first Holly and I got the Zero Waste Cafeteria going. Then we formed a monthly meetup group. And so somewhere after that, when it started to become clear that like, this could be a thing. I mean, we had no idea that it would become what it did, but once there was like a steady, like people are joining, it's gaining momentum, we did sit down and have lunch with him and go, how do we make sure that this is successful? How do we make sure that this complements the work that you're doing? And how can you use this really? And so he was, to his credit, super supportive and was like, if employees can organize themselves and speak as a constituent group with, to whatever extent is possible, a single voice, this is what we care about as employees, I can use that to influence the senior leaders of this company. So to his credit, he was super supportive of these efforts from day one. And then you saw that when the company made these big commitments and laid out its strategy, they put employees at the center of it.
Remind us, how many years ago was that conversation?
5.
Roughly.
Yeah,
5.
It took 5 years to go from 2 to 10,000 and everything in between. And everything in between was the company went from doing the kind of corporate bare minimum of sustainability to doing more than almost any company its size. And once that happened, once that shift happened, the community got turbocharged, because sustainability was no longer a nice to have at Microsoft. It's like, this is literally part of everything that the company is doing.
Anyone on this call who is looking to embed sustainability more into their existing job and even bring together, as you say, to build that opportunity for others, to bring people together, it's a very different macro environment that they're doing it in than your original, 5 years ago. It was just a very different time in the conversation. It was a very different space. There are fewer resources. Are there things that you either wish you had, or are there existing resources or pieces of messaging that if you had to do it again now, you would harness?
Wow, what a question. So hard to look back in time and be like, what do I wish I knew, or what do I wish I had then? It is a very different landscape. Like, not to sound like some weird old timer, but like the fact that a call like this is even happening right now is amazing. It is wonderful. Like, I know on a personal level, for many of you, it's frustrating as hell to be like, I just want to work on climate. Maybe you've been laid off and you're like using this opportunity to rethink, like, what am I doing with my life? But the fact that we're in this moment right now where there are a line of people around the block who want to work on sustainability and there aren't enough jobs for them at the macro level is a wonderful problem to have. And this did not exist, at least from what I saw 5 years ago. So things have come a really long way and have changed a lot. And I kind of believe that, like, on the longer scale of things, this pent-up demand, this pent-up interest is just the kind of first cresting wave of what the green economy of the future is going to look like, what green jobs are going to look like. I suspect that in the next couple of years, the opportunities will catch up to the demand. The traditional institutions that upskill workers, maybe academia, certifications, courses like that, are going to catch up. But in this in-between time, it's really uncomfortable because so many of us want to work on this and are like trying to figure out how to do it. So in a way, I kind of wish that I had this opportunity, this moment 5 years ago. But in another way, I'm glad that I didn't, because if it was this, we would have done things very differently. And in our own way, we helped create this environment. Certainly not like taking credit for the whole thing, but like at least in the Microsoft bubble, we created that environment. What I wish we knew is that you could just green your existing job instead of trying to get a different one. But it took a couple of years to really like figure that out. And it took a couple of examples of employees, like I said, green designers and green software engineers, paving a path and inspiring the rest of us to go, wow. So like many of you are probably familiar with the Project Drawdown job function action guides, right? 10 of the most common jobs in every company. Here's a literal tactical step-by-step list of things you can do as a generic policy person, public relations, program manager. Like, that would have been really cool to have 5 years ago.
And I imagine so much of that momentum, and even like at a very like brute quantitative level, we can look at the stats of demand in this space and use that when going to our workspaces and employers to show that there is like demand momentum for people to embed this in their jobs as well. I'm sure some of you on this call will be thinking of ways to get very, very tactical with harnessing the new macro environment that we have compared to 5 years ago. We have a question in the chat on lessons learned from TAC, and I think it's a really good time, seeing as we're in the mood for nostalgia, to dig into that. Are there things that you would have done differently? And what are some lessons learned, good or bad, that you want to share with people who are looking to set up employee sustainability groups at their current employers?
Yeah. Okay, let's think. Look, running a community like this on volunteer labor is very, very challenging. It's a completely different set of incentives and constraints and rewards from you're getting paid to do this, like it's just very different. So in the early years, we fumbled a lot with like, how do you even articulate what this commitment is to somebody so that when they raise their hand and say, yes, I'll volunteer for this, we both have a clear understanding of what they're saying yes to. So in the early years, it was like, we just need anybody who says they want to help. Let's figure out how you can help together. There wasn't a lot of like structure or process or like, the community was just like in its infancy. And what we ran into time and time again was people who would be really engaged and really committed and really consistent for a little while, and then would just kind of disappear and taper off. And then we realized, like, it's kind of frustrating. You're like, why did you say yes if you're not going to show up? Which is a kind of common thing in volunteer management. But then over the years, we kind of refined and got some experience, learned some hard lessons from some broken relationships and some kind of disappointing feedback from people about what their experience was like, and realized that if you're going to be the community lead or the organizer, it's on you to articulate what this commitment actually is. So a very simple thing that we did was say, okay, when you commit to volunteering to run a program or an initiative in the community, maybe you're running our monthly calls, maybe you're writing the monthly newsletter, what we're asking you to commit to is 6 months, 2 to 3 hours a week. That is so much clearer than just, hey, do you want to volunteer? Cool. So setting clear boundaries of what this actually is and isn't. The other thing we learned was that having a single volunteer for any kind of like program in a community is brittle. It's a single point of failure. People are volunteering. They get busy, their job gets crazy, their personal life gets crazy. Always use the buddy system. Always have at least 2 people for any responsibility or function in the community. Not only is that more durable if somebody gets busy or goes dark for a while, but this is about building community. It's not about one person getting the experience. It's about learning, growing, building new relationships, developing a way to do something, and then handing off the baton to the next people that come along behind you. And so I guess the final lesson learned was like, the most unsexy and boring part of community work is process documentation, but it is the most important, because when you have people who are coming and going, in our case, every 6 months, they gain institutional knowledge, tribal knowledge about how the community works, and then they leave. So if you don't write that down for the next people, you're starting from scratch. So it's not very sexy, but process documentation in a community is super important so that people can pick right up where their predecessors left off.
Amazing. Was there a lot of, I'm sure there was a lot of like co-learning that happened in the team. And I'm sure as well, having a base level of climate literacy is so important, but obviously it's not something that anyone on this call is born with. How did you do that as a volunteer-led team? How did you upskill together? How did you get people involved? How did you hopefully maybe explain to people that they didn't need to be climate scientists to get involved? What was that confidence bridging, if that happened?
Yeah, well, the first thing we did, and this took a while, it took maybe a year or two, but we pressured the company and said, why don't you create a sustainability training for employees? Just like anything you want your workforce to be educated on, think about all the generic stuff that we all learn at our jobs, like compliance or security or like whatever. If you want your workforce to know about something, train them on it. And so it took a while, but eventually Microsoft did create its own sort of homegrown sustainability training. Then we had a place to send people. Look, this is an officially sanctioned, Microsoft created sustainability training. You can learn about the way the company thinks about sustainability, what its commitments are, what it's doing, and all of that. And so that helped kind of get this first tidal wave of sustainability fluency or climate literacy into the workforce. But the community has a different, sort of unique way of doing that, which I hinted at earlier in the slides, which was like, when you have these open discussion forums, in our case, using Microsoft Teams, you create a place where anyone can ask a question and get an answer. Anyone can share a resource. Look at this article I read, check out this documentary, whatever. And there's no way to like quantify that, but the cumulative effect of that, of, in this case, 10,000 people collaborating, sharing, asking questions, providing answers in the open, that raises the sustainability fluency of the workforce. And we saw that. If you go from year 1 to year 5, and you look at even the kinds of questions that were being asked, just an enormous difference. And that is the first and most important step. Like, unless in an environment where you're trying to do sustainability within your current company, if you can't even articulate what your company's sustainability commitments are, how are you going to make sure that the energy that you spend doing this, the spare time and energy that you spend doing this, is laddering up to something that's going to be impactful? I've talked to so many employees and employers over the years who just have this kind of like frustrating thing where it's like, our employees have all of these ideas for what we should be doing, but they don't make sense, or they're not particularly well educated. And then on the other side, employees are like, why won't my company listen to me? Like, why, And that's that tension is healthy to an extent, but we need to figure out ways to get people working together and to get employers to understand the value of having their broader workforce engage in their efforts, and for employees to take some onus and say, it's going to be on you to actually do your homework and like learn about your company's overall sustainability posture. Because from there, you can also push and influence and try to get them to do more, or maybe do something if they're doing nothing.
Amazing. I think on that note as well, everyone on this call is part of a sustainability community simply by being on this call. And I know there are so many resources out there which are designed to support climate literacy, specifically within organizations. And I would love it if anyone has some top of mind. I know there's like Planet Group, Work for Climate, Work on Climate have done a bunch. Like there are more than I can even begin to name. Project Drawdown. Let's put them in the chat because people on this call will be looking for them. So if anyone could just shoot some URLs to the chat, that would be really, really useful for everyone else. On that note, we've got just under 8 minutes left. I want to make sure we get through some of the amazing questions that have been asked. I'm going to ask you, Drew, to be speedy in your responses because we've got quite a few. And I'm going to start with, we have someone, Dana, quick question, where did the team report? Was it direct line to the CEO or to HR?
The sustainability team, the like official one at Microsoft, is that the question?
No, the employee group, the volunteer-led group.
Oh, I mean, we reported to whoever we reported to. It's a decentralized volunteer employee community. It's not like an official organization chart. Whoever your manager was and whatever your day job was and wherever you sat, that's where you reported to.
Amazing. Fab, thanks. I will jump to the next. The entrepreneurial motions described sound a lot like unions. Any thoughts on their formal intersections?
Sorry, like who or like what?
Like unions.
Unions. Ah, yes. We drew a lot of inspiration from traditional labor unions, for sure. I was a community organizer in my past life in the environmental nonprofit space and in the punk scene in a different way. But yeah, I mean, like, look, at the base, this is all about people power. That's why I played Take the Power Back by Rage Against the Machine at the top of this call. That this is about employees getting a seat at the table where they have historically been excluded. This is about employees flexing their muscle and saying, we have an important role to play in this, and we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to help you be more sustainable. So yeah, if you look at the way that labor unions have traditionally done that for workers in the last 100, 150 years, there's a lot of really good lessons learned and inspiration about what happens when a critical mass of people stand up for their rights. And in this case, it's employees at companies saying, we want a seat at the table when it comes to the decisions you make for sustainability, and we want the opportunity to work on that. So I, at least personally, have drawn a ton of inspiration from the sort of traditional blue-collar labor movements.
Amazing. Thanks, Val, for that question. We've got a question from Julia. What's the best way to engage executive support for sustainability groups? Do you connect it to ESG goals, or perhaps facilitated by the ESG leader or team?
Sorry, can you say the first part of the question again?
Yeah. What is the best way to engage executive support for sustainability groups?
Yeah.
Connect it to ESG goals or have it led by the ESG team?
So again, try to get top-down support and executive sponsorship from the CSO or the equivalent. Whoever the person at your company is that's in charge of sustainability, start by, if it's not clear, start by asking them, what role do employees have in this company's sustainability strategy? If they don't have an answer for that, it's time to have a conversation. It's time to help them figure out how to do that. And that is an invitation to all of you to be thought leaders and relationship managers and go help them figure it out. But that's definitely the first place you should start. Understand what the company's sustainability goals and commitments are. Maybe it's ESG, maybe it's not. Understand what their strategy is to actually do that. They should be publishing that. It should be transparent. It should be available to all employees. If it's not, that's another great conversation you can have. And if they haven't yet begun to think about or even articulate how employees are going to be a part of that, that's an invitation to go have that conversation and help them figure it out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julia, for the question. Did you bump into employees wanting to be part of it, but unable to find the time outside of their regular work hours? Did the company compensate them for any time on these initiatives?
Well, so there's two important distinctions. One is a community member who just, they opt in, they join. It's up to them how much they engage. Maybe they look at the community once a year. Maybe they're in there, they attend every call, they read every newsletter. Like, it's totally up to them. The average community member had no formal responsibility or obligation to the community. That inner circle of volunteer leaders who actually ran the community, ran the programs, iterated on things, created the value for the members, they did have an expectation and a commitment. As I said, roughly 2 to 3 hours a week for 6 months at a time. And so, sorry, I lost the original intent of the question, but it's an important distinction because most people have no obligation to the community, but that small group who ran things did. What was the question?
Did you bump into employees wanting to be part of it but unable to find the time?
Yes.
And did the company compensate them?
Yeah. So I mean, for the volunteer leaders, oftentimes, they would raise their hand and sign up and say, I want to do this. And then when push came to shove, they didn't actually have the time, which is why we use the buddy system. And that's okay. Like, this is what it's like to run programs with volunteers. You have to be flexible and accommodating and understanding that, like, this is not people's number one priority. As far as compensation goes, not officially, although one of the really cool things about Microsoft is that it has an internal carbon tax. So it charges its own business groups a real fee based on their emissions as an incentive to, one, get them to lower their carbon emissions, and two, the money that's raised from the tax goes into basically an internal innovation fund that funds projects and all kinds of other things. So the sustainability community, because it had top-down support and executive sponsorship, actually had a budget that came from that internal carbon tax. And so that's not money that went into our bank accounts, but it is money that we could use to run events or, do movie screenings or host volunteer events in one of our chapters or whatever. So people didn't get compensated directly, but if you did a really impactful project, you would get featured in the external facing sustainability report. And that's a super powerful incentive for people. Run a great project, design something sustainable, change a business practice. You're featured in a best-in-class corporate sustainability report. You can brag about that on your LinkedIn or share it in your network or whatever.
Climate is definitely a part of your job at that point.
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing. I want to make sure that we end on time. Thank you so much, Drew, for joining us. You are a fountain of wisdom and knowledge and just really, really inspiring to hear from. Thank you to everyone who asked a question or shared something in the chat and brought the energy today and participated in the poll. I will share the screenshots of the result of the poll if you didn't manage to see it in the MCJ Slack. Any parting words from you, Drew? I'm going to encourage people to reach out to you with more questions if they have them via LinkedIn, or I know you're part of the MCJ Slack as well. But any parting words before we wrap up?
Can you remind me of this? Yeah, I just put some links in the chat to my website if you want to get in touch. I am a consultant. This is my specialty. So if your company is like really wanting to get serious about employee engagement or community organizing, let's talk. Can you remind me the statistic of how many people have existing green teams in their companies right now?
I can. It was only 27%. I'm going to share the results again just one last time. Yeah, okay. 27%. So
the parting word is get off this call. And if you're one of those people, look, let's call all 100%. The 27% of you that are in a company that has a green team, are you volunteering for it? Are you leading it? Are you involved in it in a meaningful way? If you're not, get off this call and go do that. For the rest of you that don't even have one in your company, go start one right now. You don't need to wait. There's no certificate that you can get, although maybe Terra do or something will eventually have that. Like, go start the green team today. Find your people, find the other environmentalists in your company and start it. We started with 2, it became 10,000. You can very much do the same thing, and don't wait. You don't need more information. You don't need permission. You just got to go do it. And I mean, I just want people to walk away understanding that 2 things. 1, you don't need to quit your current job or employer to get a climate job. I hope that is like crystal clear. You can green your existing job. And you can also do that by organizing with your fellow employees to pressure the company to create more sustainability jobs and put more resources into sustainability. So let's just be more creative and expansive in when we think about all the different ways that you can work on climate or in climate. And it's a dial, not a switch.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. See you next month. And best of luck. Go and do it. We're right behind you. Awesome.
That's right.
See you all
I'm gonna
soon.
follow up with. I'm gonna get the attendee list and follow up with all of you. Did you go do it? No, I'm just kidding.
2-month check-in.
No.
See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great day.